So I suppose for me, the beginning of a book is a very undramatic moment. I usually don't know that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I certainly don't know what I will be doing. I sit down, I open a Word document, and I write the first thing that comes into my head. And then every day I try to write 1,000 words. And every morning I'll reread the 1,000 words and probably cut about 850 of those words again, and start from my favorite sentence. And that's really where the book comes from. I'm not a planner. It doesn't interest me to know how a book will end. I have to discover that for myself. So I suppose the lack of planning and the lack of interest in knowing how a book will end is about enjoying the process. For me, it has to be a process of discovery. Whenever I have thought, oh, this is a great idea, and I sit down and I start to write it, almost straight away dies because I already know and I'm trying to find ways to achieve certain ends. And for me, because perhaps I'm so interested in character and in story rather than intricate plots, that has to unfold itself in a really organic way, the way it does in life. I can't be trying to hit certain marks in order to get to particular ends. And that's the pleasure of writing for me, is really finding out who these people are and what the hell they're going to do. Character is absolutely the driver for me. But I don't necessarily know who I'm going to be writing about when I sit down. With A Girl Is a Half-Formed Thing, it became quickly apparent to me that she was very young. With Strange Hotel, I really didn't know until I'd written quite a few thousand words where she was in her own timeline. And with The Less Bohemians, you know, the male character, Stephen, really didn't take on any real significance until I got to a second draft. First draft was very much about Eileigh and kind of following her around, and it wasn't till later that the interest started to grow in Stephen. So I think my background in acting, having gone to drama school rather than university or done a creative writing program, was very important for me when I started to write, and still is, because it really informs how I approach creating character, about trying to tap into a kind of a wholeness of character rather than something that's focused on providing readers with the usual kind of markers of identity, like names and titles and ages and weights and types of clothing that they like, or all of those things which we usually see as kind of major tells when describing character. And instead, I've always been much more interested in what's going on inside. How do you have to describe the thought process or the effect of the body on the mind, and vice versa, about what is beneath all of the markers that we usually use to describe ourselves. What are the things that make us completely and totally singular, but also really just like everybody else? And, having studied Stanislavski, I feel that really gave me a good grounding in that. And it's something that I've carried with me through all my writing. I suppose I feel like the end just reveals itself. Like when I wrote A Girl Is a Half-Formed Thing, I didn't know how the book was going to end until about 20 pages before the end. And so it's a process of kind of running down your own logic to its natural end point. And when you get there, in terms of how you deal with language, how you make sure that those things are all rounded, that's harder because you can't know that. There is no perfect draft. And also there shouldn't be. There has to be room for the reader and for them to interpret and to understand. And I kind of always feel a little bit like it has to be good enough, but you can wring the life out of something if you write or rewrite too many times. And often, the end is just the moment where you're done, where you just think, I have nothing left to put into this book. I don't think that, publication and success and feeling that there will be a readership there when a book comes out has really changed the way that I write at all. I think it's obviously changed the degree of trepidation with which I approach publication. My first book, I had no idea what was going to happen and no expectation at all. With the second, I knew that there was a lot of expectation being placed on it from the outside. But that's, in a way, that's not part of the job. That's part of the business of being a writer, but that's nothing to do with being a writer, and you can't allow anything like that to interfere. And, God forbid you start writing for what you think the reader wants to read, then you're going to find yourself in trouble very, very quickly. I don't really feel like I don't think I've got any great tips for writing. I think in terms of dealing with the industry, be unafraid. Be less afraid than they think you should be. Be bloody minded. But in terms of being a writer, the only thing that you can never say to any writer is, for God's sake, write. That's it. And if you are really a writer, you will. And if you're not, you won't.